At midnight on New Year's Eve, the entire world stops to celebrate survival. It's a collective exhale, a moment of shared hope for a better year ahead. But on this train, midnight is a lie. The year never ends. The doors never open, and the people who disappear aren't taken. They're removed. It's a meticulous, silent process, like plucking a single thread from an old tapestry. No one notices until the fabric starts to unravel. The train itself is a relic, a metal serpent winding through a forgotten timeline. The seats are worn smooth, holding the impressions of countless passengers who never reach their destination. The air is thick with the scent of old paper, ozone, and a faint, sweet smell you can't quite place, like flowers left too long in a vase. Everything about this place whispers that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong. We're not just on a journey. We're trapped in a memory, repeating a final, terrifying moment over and over again. And the worst part, we all bought the ticket. We all got on board. We all got on board. The train was scheduled to leave at 11:37 p.m. It was just late enough to feel rushed, to make you hurry without thinking. People were scrambling, dragging luggage, their faces a mix of holiday stress and excitement, and it was just early enough to trap us, to seal us inside before the final countdown began. On board, the atmosphere was almost festive. People joked about starting fresh, about leaving the failures and heartbreaks of the year behind them. They clinked plastic cups of cheap champagne, promising to be better, to do more. They were so busy looking forward, no one looked back. No one noticed the large, ornate clock on the platform as we pulled away. Its hands were frozen, and beneath them, the display didn't say December 31st. It said, Final Day. Two simple words that should have sent a chill down every spine. But we were all too caught up in our own little worlds to see the warning staring us right in the face. We were a train full of ghosts. We just didn't know it yet. The conductor walked through the carriage only once. He didn't check tickets. He didn't offer a welcome. He just moved with a slow, deliberate pace, his gaze fixed on something far beyond the metal walls of the train. He was tall and thin, his uniform crisp, but impossibly old, like it had been preserved from another century. The strangest thing about him was his shadow. It didn't quite match his movements. It lagged a fraction of a second behind him, stretching and contorting in ways that defied the dim, flickering lights of the carriage. It was like his shadow belonged to a different time, or maybe to someone else entirely. As he reached the end of our car, he paused, his back to us. Without turning around, his voice echoed through the sudden silence. It was a dry, raspy sound, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. He said, If the train stops at midnight, do not move, not stay in your seats, not remain calm. Do not move. A simple command that carried an impossible weight. It wasn't a suggestion. It was the only rule for survival. At 11:58 p.m., the lights in the carriage dimmed to a dull, amber glow. A collective murmur went through the passengers, a mix of annoyance and nervous laughter. Someone joked that the power company was celebrating New Year's too. At 11:59, every phone screen, every digital watch, every glowing device froze on the same 4 digits. The time stopped. Then the train stopped. It wasn't a sudden, jarring halt. There was no screech of brakes or lurching motion. It was a gentle, seamless deceleration, like it had reached a destination that wasn't on any map, a place that wasn't meant for people. A profound silence fell, so deep you could hear your own heartbeat. People slowly turned to look out the windows, expecting to see a station, or at least the familiar darkness of the countryside. But outside, there was no darkness. There was nothing, no sky, no ground, no horizon to give a sense of distance or scale. Just a flat, endless, featureless absence of everything. Avoid. A man near the front whispered the question on everyone's mind. Where are we? The answer didn't come from any person. It seemed to come from the very air inside the train. A cold, disembodied voice that said, Still here. Despite the cold dread seeping into the carriage, despite the frozen clocks and the impossible view outside, Habit is a powerful thing. Someone, somewhere, decided to keep tradition alive. Their voice, shaky at first, started the countdown. 10, 9. Others joined in, a desperate attempt to impose normalcy on the utterly abnormal. 8, 7, 6. The chant grew louder, more frantic, a shield against the suffocating silence. 5, 4, 3, 2. They reached 0. The word hung in the air, but nothing happened. No fireworks lit up the void. No distant cheers reached our ears. No sense of a new year beginning. There was just the sound of breathing, ragged and anxious. Then another sound cut through the quiet. It wasn't a scream. It was a sharp, sudden inhale, like someone gasping for air after being held underwater. A woman, sitting a few rows ahead, turned to say something to her husband. She stopped. Her eyes went wide. The seat beside her was empty. The seatbelt was still fastened, pulled tight around nothing. The fabric of the seat was still warm where he had been sitting, but the warmth was fading fast, like whatever had left had been carefully and cleanly peeled away from the very fabric of reality. We weren't just on a train. We were in a hunting ground, and something was just getting started. When the train shuddered back into motion, the door slid shut on December 31st. We were trapped. The air grew stale, thick with the smell of old wool and something metallic, like burnt wires. The windows showed nothing but a blur of gray, as if we were traveling through a storm cloud. No one spoke. We just watched the digital clock above the door. 11:58 p.m. Then 11:59 p.m. And then nothing. It held there, the numbers flickering, refusing to tip over into the new year. A quiet panic started to bubble up. You could feel it in the way people shifted in their seats, the nervous glances they exchanged. This wasn't a delay. It was a prison. Heures passées, but the clock never changed. We were suspended in the final minute of the year. Then the conductor returned. He looked different, now older. His uniform, once crisp, hung off his frame. It was like time itself was feeding on him, hollowing him out from the inside. Someone from the back of the car, a man in a rumpled suit, lunged forward and grabbed the conductor's coat. He shook him, shouting, "What's happening? Why aren't we moving?" The conductor didn't resist. He just stood there, his face a mask of weary resignation, and said, "The year's changing. The train must be balanced." A woman nearby asked the question on all our minds, her voice trembling. "What does that mean? Balanced?" The conductor's gaze swept over us, and it felt like he was weighing each one of us. "Some of you will move forward into the new year," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "The rest will stay, so the year can close." The rule was simple, and it was cruel. The train didn't choose. It just took. Every time the clock seemed on the verge of ticking over to midnight, someone would vanish. There was no flash of light, no dramatic exit. One moment they were there, clutching their luggage, and the next, just an empty seat. It wasn't a selection process. It was a culling. If you were thinking about the future, about the parties you were missing or the resolutions you planned to make, you were taken. If you were paralyzed by fear, unable to think of anything but the cold dread filling the carriage, you were taken. If you pleaded with whatever unseen force was doing this, you were taken. The train didn't care who you were, what you had done, or what you were going to do. It only cared if your story for the year was finished. The clocks never reached midnight. They just twitched, stuck at 11:59 p.m., like a muscle caught in a spasm, refusing to relax. I had to know more. I pushed through the silent, terrified passengers, making my way to the final coach of the train. It was colder back here, the air heavy, and there, on the back wall, I found it. Scratched deep into the metal were thousands of marks, years, dates, and names. Names carved with such desperation that the metal around them was bent inward, warped by the force. Above the endless list, 2 lines were etched into the wall. Last stop. December 31. A voice behind me made me jump. It was the conductor. "Time doesn't move on its own," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It needs weight. Something to hold it back." I looked from the wall of names back to his exhausted face. "What happens to them?" I asked. "The ones who stay?" He didn't answer. He just reached out and touched the wall. Under his fingertips, the cold metal felt strangely warm. Suddenly, the entire train lurched violently, throwing me against the wall. The clocks on every display flashed. For a split second, I saw it. January 1, Saint-A. A wave of relieved screams and laughter erupted through the coaches. People thought it was over, but the screams of joy quickly turned into screams of terror. The disappearances weren't subtle anymore. It was a purge. Seats emptied with a violent suddenness. Hands slipped out of coats, leaving them to fall empty to the floor. Voices were cut off mid-word, silenced forever. When the violent shaking finally stopped, a profound quiet fell over the train. Only a handful of us remained, scattered among the empty seats. The conductor leaned against the door frame, looking utterly spent. "Enough," he whispered to the empty air. The weight was balanced. The doors hissed open, revealing a world celebrating. Fireworks exploded in a starburst of colors against the night sky. Laughter and music poured in from the station platform. The few survivors scrambled out, running into January, crying with relief. I stood up, ready to join them, but my feet wouldn't move. I was frozen, anchored to the spot. I looked at my reflection in the window, and my breath caught in my throat. The face staring back wasn't mine, not really. It was older. The eyes were hollow, filled with a weariness that didn't belong to me. I was becoming part of the train. I fumbled for my ticket, my hands shaking. The destination was gone. In its place, a single word: anchor. The conductor, now looking almost translucent, removed his hat. "You'll understand soon," he said, his voice fading. "Waiting hurts less than ending. The train is always looking for its next anchor. So if this year feels like it's leaving you behind, don't panic. Time still needs someone to stay." Thanks for watching.